Welcome to Pentecostal Preaching Channel. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what you see. Hit the bell to be notified when something new is uploaded. Have a great day.
Now, for context, this is just before Jesus started his 3-year ministry on earth. Immediately prior to when he went into Galilee and surprised everybody. So Matthew chapter 4, starting in verse 1, and I'm going to read from the English Standard Version. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. You can do King James if it works. That wasn't a theological statement, but I'll give them a little more time because I've been on the receiving end of this. So the time period that we're talking about, of course, Jesus grew up and there was the one surprise encounter he had with the teachers in the temple, and it kind of let people know that something was special. But then it's mostly silent after Jesus' birth, aside from that one incident, until this point. And Matthew chapter 4 talks about it, Luke chapter 4 talks about it, and there's 2 verses in Mark chapter 1. Mark just says, well, the thing happens. Great, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. But Jesus was led up by the Spirit to the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. This is a common story. I'm going to continue reading out of the English Standard Version. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. That makes a lot of sense so far. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." You're hungry, so fix the problem. But he, Jesus, answered, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple, the highest point, and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, "All these I will give to you, if you'll fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. So we're going to walk through this. If you'll walk through this again with me, you can be seated while we walk. Let's walk through this account of the wilderness temptation of Jesus Christ and look at what it means from the biblical context and the historical context that it happened in, and what it means for us today. Because I think that there are a lot of parallels in the way that Jesus talks about himself and the way that the devil attacks Jesus in these temptations that we can learn from. We're going to see the power that God gives us through that identity of relationship with him. So this is something that God started. Now, Jesus was God in flesh, but let's observe Matthew chapter 4 verse 1 said, Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness. Luke 4:1 says Jesus was led by the Spirit in the wilderness. And Mark 1:12 says the Spirit immediately drove him into the wilderness. In other words, he went out into this deserted place for some purpose. God had designed some purpose, some plan and some test for the man Christ Jesus. And in Luke 4 and 14, he says that Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit. So the purpose was to send him out to test him so he could come back with power. So there was something that changed, or something that was learned while Jesus was out in the wilderness that is applicable for us when we're tried and when we're tested today. And there's a few parallels here that I want to draw out, because Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness, and long before that, the Israelites, the people that he came to, had spent 40 years in the wilderness. Do you remember when they spent 40 years in the wilderness? So when they came out of Egypt, God had delivered them from the land of sin, right? That's the analogy that he makes often. He says, I brought you out of Egypt, and he sent them into the wilderness. And there's a whole side lesson on that, but God shows where he put them. They were intentionally in that wilderness so that things could happen. They had to become a people. They had to become a nation and not just a collection of Egyptian slaves before he could do what he needed to do with them. And it took them a while to get there. That's why they were there 40 years. It was a long lesson. Well, Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness that parallels the 40 years. And just before Israel had entered their promised land, at the end of that 40 years, Moses delivered a divinely inspired speech to them. It's captured in Deuteronomy chapters 5 through 8. Don't worry, we're not going to read all of chapters 5 through 8. And Moses told them about their relationship with God. So Moses took the time, God took the time through Moses, at the end of their testing in the wilderness, to talk to the people of Israel about, here's who you are. You're defined by your relationship with me. And he recounted all the things that he had done, and he talked about how they should be interacting with him and how they should think about their lives, how they should think about themselves. Well, just before Jesus entered his earthly ministry, right here in Matthew chapter 4, Luke chapter 4, before he goes back and goes into Galilee, he spends these 40 days in the desert, and he's confronted by the devil about his identity and his relationship with God. And not only that, every time Jesus is tempted, when he refutes, when he resists the devil, he quotes from Deuteronomy chapters 5 through 8. So I think there's a strong connection for us to look at that biblical context, that Deuteronomy 5 through 8 has something to do with Jesus' identity and relationship, and the relationship that we're supposed to have. So let's look at what that has, or what that says. Because on top of that, every time Satan comes and tempts him, two-thirds of the time, Satan starts by saying, if you are the Son of God, who are you really? Right? You think you have a purpose, you think there's some plan that's going on, but if it's real, I want some proof, right? If you are the Son of God, he's questioning Jesus' identity as Son of God. So what the Israelite identity was, this context from Deuteronomy 5 through 8, came out of this learning time in the wilderness where the children of Israel saw the power of God and saw all the things that he had done for them, all the ways that he provided for them. We'll see in a minute in Deuteronomy chapter 8, he describes how dependent they were on him. And that's where they developed a relationship with him. And here's what Israel was supposed to do. They were supposed to take that lesson and that identity and create a nation that the world had never seen. They were supposed to be something that was unique and special and different, that was remarkable because of what had happened to them in the desert. And it was very personal. So Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 2 through 3, Moses is speaking, and he says, the Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. Not with our fathers, because 40 years, right, a whole generation had passed away. Originally, there was a covenant with the first generation, and he said, no, it wasn't with Dad. It wasn't the last generation. This isn't something ancestral. God made a covenant with you. Not with our fathers did the Lord make this covenant, but with us who are all of us alive here today. What's a covenant? A promise or a contract. Often in the Bible it has to do with a relationship as well. A covenant is something that's binding. You've decided to bind yourself to this. So he's made a promise to them. And he said, this will always be like this. As long as you are in, I'm in too. And here's what he tells them to do in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. What do you think when somebody puts the sign on the doorposts of their house or on their gates or in their front yard, when they wear the shirt with a slogan, right? What do you think it means to them? That's who they are. They're identifying with, this is me. This is what I'm about. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show everybody, and I'm going to remind myself, right? One of the things I get out of this passage is God is saying, this always needs to be in front of you. Who we are, our relationship with each other. This needs to be what you think about constantly. Put it on your door. Put it on the nightstand beside you, so it's the first thing that you see in the morning. Write it on your hand. This needs to be so much a part of you that you don't know anything else. This is who you are. You are about me. You're bound to me. So it seems, considering that Jesus Christ was quoting out of this speech that Moses gave to Israel, and that the entire temptation calls to identity specifically, that this is what Jesus was thinking about. As he was in the desert and as he was learning, as he was being tested, his thoughts were about his relationship with God. That being in the wilderness was an opportunity for him to rehearse and for him to remind himself, yes, I'm out here and it's uncomfortable and I don't want to be here. I don't enjoy it. But God put me here and I'm about him. I'm bound to him. I only survive because he provides for me. He told me to be here and to fast, and to go through this ordeal, and I'm sticking with it. So this was what is on his mind. So let's walk back through this temptation and look at each of them individually to see how this unpacks from the scriptural context. Going back to Matthew chapter 4, verses 3 and 4, the tempter came to him and said to him, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread. But he answered, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So first, Satan goes to Jesus by questioning his identity as Son of God. Jesus ignores it. Look at it again. He doesn't even answer the question. He doesn't care whether the devil thinks he's Son of God or not. He says, no, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Here's the longer quote from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 2 through 3. You shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So he's talking about, I took you out here. I took you where there are no distractions. The desert doesn't have very many distractions. Aside from the hunger and the thirst and the heat, there's not a lot of other distractions. I took you here to focus, and to focus on me, and to see that you don't need yourself to be provided for. You need me. You don't need someone else to take care of you. You need me. I put you in a place where you would be hungry, and I fed you. I wasn't mean. I fed you. So you would see I'm the one that feeds you. And when you get over into the promised land, and you get into Canaan and everything's great, you need to remember I'm the one that feeds you. When everything's plentiful, I'm still the one who feeds you. That's why man doesn't live by bread alone, because God is the provider of the bread. God is the provider of my food and my income and everything else that I have. Right? Has God, how many people has God given a job? He's definitely given me every job. Every time it was obviously, well, I didn't make this happen. This is better than I would have gotten. God gave it to me. God's the one who provides for me. That's why I don't depend on my money, and I don't depend on the possessions that I have, because I know it's God doing it. If I have God, I can lose the possessions. They're not worth much. The wilderness was where the Israelites learned to trust God only for their survival. And now Jesus went through a mirror experience of that. So when the devil comes to him and says, well, why don't you just take care of it? Why don't you do what you need to do? Go and God told you to fast, but you're hungry, man. Make some bread. Right? It seems to fix the problem, but it goes against the principle that God provides for me. And God told me to do this, and it seems like it's not working out, but God provides for me. And I'm not going to go around that rule. I'm not going to go outside of that relationship in order to try to provide for myself when God has said, you depend on me. So that's the first temptation. And the second was in Matthew chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. Then the devil took him to the holy city and set him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, again, it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. So again, Satan, he questions the identity of Jesus. And again, Jesus totally ignores it and goes right back to Moses' speech from Deuteronomy 6:16 and says, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test as you tested him at Massah. I think people misunderstand sometimes, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. So there's another reference to that event in Deuteronomy 9:22 that may give you a different sense of what happened there. At Taberah also, and at Massah, and at Kibroth Hattaavah, you provoked the Lord to wrath. Not testing like, well, let's see, is he good or not? Let me trust him a little bit. That's not what he meant by testing. You provoked the Lord to wrath. So the full story is in Exodus 17, 1 through 7. And if you don't have it, that's fine. All the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of sin by stages, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. So problem, no water. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink. We want it now." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt? To kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." I'm going to skip the rest of the passage. It goes through verse 7, but God makes a way. God is merciful, and he does provide water. But what happened at Massah? The people decided this is how it should be. Yeah, God provided for us all those other times, all those other campsites, but there's not water here right now. Things aren't how I want them to be. This is how I said it should be, and God needs to adjust to my ideas. That was how they tested the Lord. That was how they provoked the Lord. And if you look at it again, that's exactly what the devil's suggesting. He said, well, you're up here on this high pinnacle of the temple. Throw yourself down and just expect God needs to save me because I decided to do this. It was when he was suggesting you draw the lines and then you tell God to color inside them. Does that sound like Deuteronomy chapter 6? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. You shall bind it on your hands and put it on your frontlets. No, what God says is, I draw the lines and you color inside them. I've set it up so you'll be provided inside the relationship, the covenant I've made with you. We've bound ourselves to each other. And if you'll stay in that relationship, then I'll take care of you. I'm your provider. I'm almighty. I'll do everything. Right? In case you've missed it, we bring nothing. Right? He does everything. We're here because he loves us. We don't draw the lines. He draws the lines. So when you examine it, that was the temptation. Don't blame God because he didn't do what you thought he should do. But expect him to live up to his word and live up to his character. So the third temptation in Matthew chapter 4, verse 8 through 10 is, again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And this was how you'd sell property, by the way, in that time. You'd take them to some vantage point and you could see, here's everything I own. This is mine. And I'll sell it to you for the low, low price of your soul. All these I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me. Then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." It goes all the way back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, all the way to the foundational, the intro of Moses' speech. Satan's given up on questioning his identity entirely. He stopped even saying, well, if you're the Son of God, oh wait, he knows who he is. I'm just going to go straight at it. He offers him a shortcut because ultimately Jesus is going to have all the power in the world, right? He says, well, you can have it right now. I own it. I'll just sell it to you. And you can get right to the end. And Jesus knows eventually he'll hold all power. Eventually he'll have everything. But that's not the goal. That's not why he's here. That's not why he's in relationship. That's not why he's in the wilderness. And in fact, that fix requires him to violate the central goal, the central tenet of being in relationship with God and serving him only, that he'd already been thinking about and rehearsing and recalling how it went with the Israelites in the desert, that everything is about how I am bound to God. Deuteronomy 6:5, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. All does not leave a lot of room. All does not leave any room. All your soul, all your might. And Deuteronomy 6, verses 12 through 13 says, take care lest you forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. It is the Lord your God you shall fear. Him you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. This is what he quotes. So the enemy kept trying to simplify. Simplify with every temptation. Well, maybe just cheat a little over here. Maybe just cheat a little over there. Maybe just, bend the rules a little bit. Maybe just give up a little bit of that relationship capital. But every iteration infringed on a more central principle. Every time he tried to simplify the temptation, it was more obvious that this would violate a relationship that was important. Every time it got to the next question, it was closer and closer to asking Jesus to give up the relationship he was bound to. And finally, it was laid bare. It was obvious. Fall down and worship me. It doesn't take too many no's before your temptations show what they're really asking for. And they're really asking for you to worship something other than God. All your heart, all your soul, all your might. And that's a commitment that develops in the wilderness, in the hard times and the hard places that God takes you to. He asks you to go. Are you going to go and deepen your relationship with me? Are you going to trust me a little more and end up in a hard place where you can learn how close and how precious that relationship is between you and me? That's where that commitment comes from. Until you've gone through that experience where he's your only hope and he's your only way to survive, you don't get to that level of all your heart, all your soul, all your might. But we seem pretty confused nowadays about our identities, which is the central question, right? And it seems really pronounced in our time that no one knows who they are. People are consumed with trying to present themselves as something acceptable. I learned, don't subscribe to someone's Instagram if you want to know what their life actually looks like. Because they're constantly trying to put up something that looks like what they think you'll like. They're constantly trying to shift and change and ally with someone else and change their identity so that you will accept them. They'll mix and match ideas and trends and associations with popular people or powerful people, or they'll just scramble to put together some kind of identity that will be liked or not criticized. Maybe that's the next level goal, just as long as no one can make fun of me, right? Companies do this. Companies are desperate for customers, and they want to try to seem genuine and attach themselves to causes that people care about. I remember a few months ago, internet pundits mocking companies because they didn't know whether they should turn the logo rainbow for Pride Month or blackout for, I don't know. We want to try to please everybody. Everybody's doing something funky with a logo. We got to do something. We got to seem like we're in on it. The reason why you end up having to make silly choices over your logo is because you never had that value in the first place. That wasn't a core part of who you were. Otherwise, everybody'd already know. It's a problem of our age. They're putting on a show to convince you they support your cause. And in 2 years, they're not going to remember. But people do the same thing. People keep trying to put up a front, put up a face. We live in a culture where people without an identity argue with each other about who they are. And if you'll give me the leeway to frame it this way, this is kind of what happened in the wilderness with Jesus and Lucifer. Lucifer used to be the son of the morning. He used to be the praise leader in heaven. He used to worship God. But then after he rebelled and he was cast out, there was nothing left. He had no relationship. He had no purpose. So, in the wilderness, a fallen angel with no remaining identity walked up to Jesus in the desert and started a fight with him about who he was. If you've never had someone try to convince you that you aren't who you are, it's a weird experience. They don't know who they are, but they're convinced you're not whatever you said you were. But Jesus didn't bother arguing with Satan. He didn't come back and say, yes, I am the Son of God. You want to fight me? He totally ignored the issue. He ignored the fact, he wasn't concerned. Do you believe me? Do you really think I am who I am? You're going to find out eventually. I know who I am. But not only that, instead of arguing with the devil about who he was as Son of God, Jesus constantly pointed back to Moses' speech to the Israelites about the identity, who a Jew was, who an Israelite was, someone in relationship with God, aligned with God's plan for their life. Jesus didn't argue about being the Son of God. Jesus continually called himself Son of Man. It didn't require a divine identity to resist the devil. It only required knowledge that I'm in relationship with God. I have the identity of a man in relationship with God. And that was where Jesus stood, and that was where he resisted, and that was what the devil had to walk away from. So Jesus didn't come at temptation with some divine empowerment. He came at it with a knowledge of who he was in God. Hebrews 4:14 through 16 says, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So Jesus was leaving us an example here, that you don't need to be God to resist the devil. You just need to lean into this God-given identity, this relationship with him. Everything in our lives is supposed to be contained in that relationship with God. A covenant is a binding agreement. It's a promise. If you've, in some neighborhoods, some condo communities, they have CCNRs, right? Conditions, covenants, and restrictions, right? The covenants is the promise, the contract. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to keep up my end of the bargain. And our covenant is total dependence on God and total surrender to God. Now, for a long time, I thought of temptation as a series of choices. Every time, I had to make a choice, I had to weigh it individually. But here's something that may help you, because I think it's illustrated by what Jesus did. From a different realm, there's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear that I read recently. He talks about how to build your habits, how to build your good habits, get rid of your bad habits, the whole thing. From the research, if you have to muster your willpower for every choice, you got to think about every choice individually. At some point in the day, you're going to run out. You can't just force yourself into a decision every time. So that's a plan for failure. But people who can rest on an identity, people who can look at each choice and say, well, would the person I want to be do this? Those people are successful at building their habits or at losing their habits. Some have a guiding question. One friend of the author, they used the question, they wanted to lose weight, but they knew that the goal wouldn't help them get there. That would just get them to think about the goal. So they said, every time I have a choice, I'm going to think, what would a healthy person do? Whether they're going to get up and run, or whether they're going to order a specific meal, or whatever it was, what would a healthy person do? 2 years later, they were down 100 pounds. Belonging to Jesus Christ should be our guiding question, our compass. What would a child of God do this? What would God have me do? For a while ago, the trend was, what would Jesus do? WWJD. I actually don't know where that trend ended up, but the question is good. If I am following God, what does it look like? Every question would God be happy with this? Will lead us to the right places. We don't have to try to put up a front of who we are. We don't have to try to construct an identity to impress people, because we're defined by our relationship with God. Would God be happy with me doing this? And if he would be, we're going to end up, if you want to be aligned with a cause, you're going to end up with the right one. If you're always asking, would God be happy with it? Because the right causes are the ones that are also asking that question, the ones that God is happy with. So let God call you to the wilderness, call you to a place where you can deepen your relationship with Him, where you can rely on Him, and you can learn to trust on Him and commit to that relationship that He wants to have with you. You wouldn't mind standing for the last little bit. We'll end in a short prayer again. But you don't have to muster willpower. You don't have to get up your energy and try to evaluate every choice as, let me reason this through, right? What's the argument being provided? Am I really, am I a good person if I don't do this, or if I do this, or, is this, how close is this to the line of being legal? Or, I think everybody's got a list of those questions, right? The question that I need to be asking myself is, would God be happy with me? Is this going to help my relationship with God? This is what defines me. Is this going to bind me closer to God? Is this going to keep my conscience clear? Those are the questions to define us as children of God, and those are the questions that are going to keep us far into the clear, right? There's probably an answer to some of those questions that Satan asked to Jesus that's not good, not bad, just okay. I don't know what it is, but there's probably some kind of, well, you didn't sin, right? But what Jesus considered was, who am I? I'm in relationship. I'm in covenant with God. I'm bound to Him. So my answer is, I'm always way over on this side. I'm always what takes me to God, right? It's not a question of, well, I'm hungry or not. The response was, it's not about being hungry. It's about where God wants me to be, right? Through each one of these examples, He said, it's not about the thing you're tempting me with. It's not about the question you're asking me. It's not about the identity you're confronting me with. It's not about whatever you want me to say yes or no to. It's about God leading my life and me being totally dependent on Him. And that's the real question that you're trying to get me to ask or to go back on. And don't value yourself based on what temptation questions get posed by other people. Don't value yourself by the labels other people put on you. Value yourself by whether you have a Deuteronomy 6 attitude. Do I serve the Lord my God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might? That's the important question. It's not what everybody else says. It's what he sees when he looks at me. That's the important question. So if you would join me in a short time of prayer. Jesus, thank you for showing us. Thank you for being an example to us. God, I'm so thankful that you were tempted in all ways. I'm so thankful that you can relate to what we go through. I'm thankful that you've shown us that knowing you, that being tied to you, being bound to you, that's more important than any question or any pleasure or any kind of shortcut that could be afforded. God, you're more important than anything I own or anything that I am. The question is about, am I tied to you? Am I bound to you? God, when you ask me to go, and when you ask me to go into a situation that is going to test me and is going to determine whether I'm going to grow and whether I'm going to trust you, please help me to say yes. Please help me to lean in and to learn who you are and to learn how dependent I am on you. Lord, please help me to follow, to always to say yes, and to deepen that bond with you. God, I want to please you. I want to be yours. Lord, please help us to have the right perspective. I thank you for what you're doing in every life here that's connected to this church. I thank you for those that you will save through these testimonies and through these children of God. Thank you for everything that you do, Jesus.